Hello, everybody. My name is Paul Shapira, and we are making a space opera. And today we are going to discuss songwriting. These are the steps I use when I make a song. We're not going to get into notes in music theory. That's a whole, another bag. But this is simply, when I make a song, this is how I approach it. I do tend to follow the same basic steps over and over. I would also point out, listen, ask 5 different musicians, you'll get 5 different answers. Obviously, I do things in a very particular, I write a very particular type of music in that I literally make stories. Like I write sci-fi fantasy musicals. So my albums are not just a collection of songs, they are a clear story with a beginning, a middle, and end. Characters, the singers are actual characters. There's narrators letting you know what's going on. Thus, I don't really need to come up with, basic song ideas, because before I've even begun, I actually write a story out. And then after I've written the story, before we even get to the album part, I then take the story and turn it into an album outline. Meaning that I decide like, okay, this bit will be song number 1, this bit will be song number 2, this bit will be song number 3, making sure, obviously not all the songs are events that occur. There have to be songs which are just a character singing their reaction or, declaring their sort of emotional state. That's one thing you can do and should do, in musicals that you would not do, for instance, in literature. So when I sit down to do an album or even a song, I'm somewhere in the outline. Like I've 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm on the 5th song, right, in the album, and it's right there, number 5. This is what happens. There we are. Okay, so that is a very unique position. Most other musicians and composers, don't deal with that. So, without further ado, step 1, before anything else is vibes, but you actually have to think of the vibes, the mood, the genre. There are times where I do albums that are all contained within a single genre. But in any case, I need to understand the direction I'm going to be moving towards in the song. Like it's going to be, sad and melancholy. It's going to be, happy, uplifting. Obviously, I prefer more complicated moods and emotions. But man, the vibe. I got to know what vibe I'm going to be aiming for. A lot of songwriting, a lot of art, I believe, is you shoot an arrow, phew, and then you start following the direction you shot the arrow in, but you allow yourself to get lost along the way, because getting lost is what allows you to discover the interesting places that you otherwise would not have run across. So the vibe is the arrow shot. Okay, so we got the vibe. Next would be melody. I didn't always do it this way, but these days, for the last several years, I always, before I do anything else, before I really start on the, hard, pedantic work of the songcraft, I come up with the melody that the vocals are going to sing. And then if there's going to be any, like, maybe during the prologue, or there's going to be a break where there's going to be a major instrumental melody that's going to come in, some thematic melody, I will write that too. So I will write the major melodies in this, especially the vocal melodies. So, and for that, I may sit down at the piano and just, plunk it away. I find sometimes not doing a piano, just actually coming out at you, because just sing it, because you're making it for singers. Probably the 2 best times to come up with melodies. There's also in the car and on walks and stuff like that. But I gotta say, the morning shower. Half of the melodies in my work have been come up with in the morning shower. Also, at midnight when I get up from my chair to then go brush my teeth and, basically do the going to bed stuff. For some reason, the little 10-minute period of me doing my last of the day grooming stuff is like this golden period. Stuff will just come to me and I'll run and get my phone, and then I have a little, voice app, and I'll record myself singing the melody so that the next day I can, go back over and use it. But beginning of the day and end of day, I mean, it's like these two magic moments. Lot of melodies. Here's a little tip. I don't in fact even often do this, but sometimes when I'm stuck, like a melody's just not coming and I need to come up with something, here's a little tip I use. Pick a song, obviously, that you know the words to, sing the words, but completely butcher the melody. I mean, don't even sing the melody of the song, just sing the words using whatever comes to your mind. It's a great way to spark new melodic ideas, like, itsy bitsy spider went up the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. And up came the sun and dried up all the rain. An itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again. Stuff like that. I mean, just go somewhere else with it. And then if you like what you're coming up with, figure out a way to remember it or get it down somehow. So run over to the piano and plunk it out. Or I really find recording in my phone works really well. And sometimes I'll even record in little, just lines at a time, just so I remember the first line and then the second line. In any case, melody is second. Okay, that leaves us to number 3, which is the real work. This is the stuff that I will spend days on, which is the instruments. Because now it's time, now I'm in my digital audio workstation and it's time to just start calling up instruments. I have terabytes of sound libraries, terabytes. And you got to just start putting instruments together to make, what the actual sound of the song will be. A lot of songs will have, like, the first instrument I call up will often be like the sort of instrument glue that holds up together. Something like, a piano, the piano line, or electric piano, or guitar. And that'll sort of be like the central theme, and then I'll build the rest of the instruments around that. That's not always the case, and more electronic aiming pieces, that fall in more electronic genres will tend to not have that so much. But probably 70% of the time, I'm calling up a piano, an electric piano, or a guitar as the first thing, and then I know what the chords are back when I write the melody. So you're just putting the layers together. I do not do drums first ever. Usually I'll have several instruments going before I do drums. I'm not a hip hop producer. Someone who, for instance, was doing hip hop or maybe even trap or, various types of EDM, they might completely do it the opposite way and drums first. And you could see how that would be a good idea. But for me, who writes, in a very melodic oriented style, you're going to do the drums just a little later. So, and just assembling, and the instruments, obviously, the instruments you choose, the way they go together. I mean, that's the fun of it. I can do that for days. That's, and you just do it in blocks. This is the intro block. Sounds good. This is, where the verse is going to come in. Okay, we do the verse bit. That's good. The chorus, whatever instrumental breaks are going to be, often. So the outline I have for the song may sort of determine the exact structure of it, but maybe not. I don't necessarily need to have that when I'm doing the outline. The outline just tells me what the song is going to be about in certain, key plot or character points I need to hit. And then, it's at the instrument phase where I will really decide what the structure of the song is going to be. Song structures are a big enjoyment for me. I really like that. And this is the vast amount of, the time I spend making a song is on this particular bit right here. Which leads us to number 4, which is lyrics. I may or may not actually finish all the instruments before starting lyrics. More and more recently, I have found that, especially if the song is longer, because I sometimes read some long songs, like the one I'm working on right now. I can't tell you, but it's pretty long. At some point in the process, I actually need to pause, and I need to hear the vocals. Several years ago, a technique I would do was sing the vocal melody to just nonsense syllables, but I don't really do that anymore. I actually just go ahead. I'll just take the 2 hours and just write the lyrics. And of course, we'll rewrite the lyrics as many times as we need to. But I'll pause, I'll write the lyrics, then I'll record the vocals, and I need to hear how the vocals are actually working over the instruments. And then once I have that, once I can hear that, I will then carry on with the songwriting. That's exactly what I've just done in this past song. Probably around the halfway point, I needed to hear the vocals with it. So I went and wrote the lyrics and then added them. Obviously, lyric writing is an entire craft in itself. I mean, I could make a whole video about that. And that's the skill that comes from repetition is just so key. There are so many things that I know that will work, little tricks, knowing that like words that end in ation. There's so many words that end in ation. That's such an easy thing to rhyme with, and you can do some pretty complicated things with those. There's just all these tips you pick up over just years and years and years of doing this. And in fact, I mean, with everything I've said, just the years and years, the 10,000 hours. In order to be really, really great at anything, you've got to get your 10,000 hours in. And you learn a lot in the 10,000 hours, and you have this bag of tricks that you're constantly just, putting new things into and expanding on. But lyrics especially, because I remember how much I used to struggle writing lyrics to get really good lyrics. And, I don't struggle as much as I used to. I just have built up a skill set. Okay, so you get the lyrics. So now I have the song, right? The song's done. I can sit there. I can listen to the demo of it. It's my vocals doing it. So now we have to record vocals. Often I'm not the vocal. Sometimes I'm the vocalist in the song, but often I know that I'm going to hire a singer to do it. And I've even written the song with that singer in mind. And especially I like working with singers repeatedly because I know exactly what to aim for, and I know what they can do and what they sound good at doing, and where I'm curious to kind of push them if there's a direction I've never really heard them do before that I want to just kind of see how it works. Eventually, I'm going to have to record them. Sometimes I will go to record them personally, and sometimes, a lot of singers I work with, I'll just send them the song, and they will record themselves and send it back to me. And, so I would say step 5 is recording the vocalists, and then I have the vocal thing, and then I put, the vocals on. Effects are that's another huge skill thing. Years ago, I had this guy, he used to own this studio in Belgrade, and he had just sold it. And I was living in this actually little Balkan village then. And he came by, and, when I found out all the years of experience he had, like, I made him come downstairs with me, and I was, like, can you show me some tips? So, we pulled up one of my songs. I was working on Miss Helen's Weird West Cabaret at the time. And so he took a look and he took a listen, and he's like, get rid of every effect you have. And then he, told you use, that you want to use this reverb and that, blah, 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 blah. And you want to, the biggest advice that he gave me was like, your vocals, everything's way too loud. Put it all way back. Just turn up your volume if you want to hear it louder. You need a lot more, headroom, lots of stuff like that. The one thing I will say about effects, there are 2 effect bundles or effect manufacturers that if you just buy their bundles, you really won't need anything else. And Fab Filter, get the Fab Filter, all their effects, and Sound Toys, get all the Sound Toys effects. If you have the Fab Filter bundle and the Sound Toys bundle, you have everything you'll ever need and in top of the line quality. Obviously, I do use some stuff other than that. Actually, for really spacey cosmic reverb, I love Native Instruments ROM. And I even use for basic vocal reverb. I just switched, actually, fairly recently. I use Valhalla now for my vocal reverb. However, just a little tip for what that said. Because finally, number 6 is the mixing. And the mixing does involve getting all the effects right and, making sure all the... It obviously, you're mixing the different levels of the different instruments, but you're also really taking care. Do you have too many instruments? Like, are they muddying up the sound? Do you have too many things going on in a very specific audio range, like your lower mids? Understand you have bass. Let's just say for the purpose that you have bass, mid, and treble. So 3 stages. You could really do it, but you should divide the mids into 2 stages: upper mid, lower mid, and then treble, and then bass. So 4. Is there too much stuff going on muddying up one of those? When I was coming up, one of the ways I learned was to listen to like old 70s bands. Led Zeppelin was the example that was used to explain this to me, how these 4 musicians are covering every part of the audio range, the cymbals for the really high and the bass, and for the really low, and the bass drum, and how everything fits together to do your full audio range. And the truth is, my big weakness is a tendency to over orchestrate. I will add too many things. So pulling back has been a lesson that I have, over the course of my craft and career, have constantly had to work on and keep in mind. So having too much stuff muddying up is a real issue for me that I have to pay careful attention on. And sometimes I want a really super full sound. And so, there is a lot of stuff going on and there's no way around it, but I need to make sure, if where I can, I should adjust, or don't be afraid to take out. I often have to take instruments out and throw them away. I usually do it before mixing. So mixing is getting it all right, and you can sort of mix forever. And then mastering program. You're going to use a mastering program, which you should then tweak. I use 2 mastering programs. My final mastering program is Ozone. Always the newest Ozone. But I don't use Ozone until the very end. While I'm making the track, I actually use T-Rax. So I can hear what it's, basically what it's going to sound like, properly done. And T-Rax doesn't take up that much CPU. So I'll use T-Rax all the way through. And then when I'm done with everything and it's time for the final mix and master, I'll get rid of the T-Rax, put in the Ozone, and do my final mastering with Ozone. Obviously it's not that I don't use a preset. It's that, I start with the preset and then fiddle from there. And then I make presets that are my own presets that I know for any given song, I can, immediately just use, Paul's preset and, and then tweak as need be. And then that's it. I have a finished song that I can play for people. You can always go back in and tweak also. I can tweak for years. I can write a song in 3 days and tweak it for 3 months. I mean, that's just the truth of things. But that's it. 6 steps. I wrote down the 6 steps, because so vibes, melody, instruments, lyrics, recording vocalists, which shouldn't even really be a step, but it is. We're just going to call it a step. And mixing, mastering. So that's my little speech for today. I hope it was coherent. I didn't use a script this time. We just sort of talked. And we hopefully didn't, because I stumble over words and stutter. So hopefully it was coherent. Well, that's it. People, questions? Anybody? Okay. See you all next time. Please be well and take care of yourselves.